Hello and welcome to November's Facebook Live and live stream. And today I have got Katie Crismale-Marshall with me, who is the author of Profit First for Tradies. Hey, Katie.
Hey, Laura.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
That's awesome. So first of all, before we go into the whole optimization of Profit First, I wanted to ask, how long is it now that your book has been published for?
So it has been 2 years and 5 months, actually.
There you go. Wow, time has flown.
It feels like a lifetime, but also feels like no time at all has passed.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I know that we've had, before we jump into the whole optimization of Profit First, I wanted to just quickly dive into, I guess, the number of people who have come across Profit First through your book, and I guess the impact that it's making that we don't realize when we make decisions as business owners. So I'd love to tell me more about that, Katie.
Yeah. So I knew that it would have an impact. I mean, that was the whole purpose of it, but you don't realize how much of an impact, and I think any business owner can relate. You don't actually realize the impact you have on your clients or even your potential clients, because often they're not giving you that feedback all the time. So I'll often, even though I still get emails to say, thank you for writing the book, I read just a couple of chapters and I implemented this one thing and it's made such a difference already. So there's people who don't even work with me who it has a huge impact on their business. And then obviously those who do, we're able to then actually implement it in its entirety and make such massive changes in their business. But I think it's the little things, like as a business owner, that we do that makes somebody else's life that little bit easier, that we often take for granted and don't even realize, because it's just so normal and natural for us to do it that way. But it has a massive impact on whether it's a reader or a listener or somebody that you're providing a product or service to. So I think we really underestimate the impact that we do make and can make to our potential clients and our clients.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love that. And I think that, Katie, you share with me behind the scenes that's like, oh my goodness, I received this email and I can't believe it. And, a lot of people tend to assume that, especially once you read a book or you've got a podcast that's been running and has all of these downloads, that it's just the norm, whereas it's really not.
No, I'm still just as excited now to receive any feedback as I was when it first came out, because probably even more so now, because it shows that it's going to have an impact whether I'm here or not. And you don't have to be talking to me, speaking to me to actually use the book and make an impact, which is kind of pretty cool.
That's so cool. Thank you for indulging me for a minute about your book. I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but it is important, because what your book is an adaptation and an optimization of Profit First specifically for tradies. So on that note, I'd love to just start a conversation around optimizing Profit First and what this actually means. So within our membership, as you know, with all PFPs, we tend to have a lot of discussions around, well, how should we do this rollout? And I generally come back with, well, it depends. And I think that really speaks to optimization. So can you talk a little bit to some of the tweaks that you might make with your clients or tradies in particular with Profit First that makes a really big difference that most people may not be aware of?
Yeah, and I always say that Profit First is an amazing framework, and it's just that. It's where we start. It's not just a one size fits all. And the changes, the really big changes, and the simplicity in the being able to make simple changes in your business by changing or adapting that framework to work for you. So yes, as you say, it always depends. For me, with my tradies, one of the biggest keys is making sure they're actually putting their materials and subcontractors away in their materials and subs account, which I know sounds kind of obvious, but that just by having that one account, I've had countless emails from people who have said, just by opening that one account and putting that money over there for that made me realize that I'm not pricing correctly, that I'm not managing the way that my what I'm quoting to what I'm actually using material wise. And just by having that one bank account separated has given them in some instances a real shock. They kind of knew something wasn't working right, but just by doing that one step made a huge difference. The other thing that I do with a lot of my clients now is putting money aside for staff entitlements, so holidays, long service leave, all of those sorts of things. So we don't get to this time in the year and all my tradies start to freak out because everyone's going on holidays and they've got no cash to pay them, or somebody unexpectedly leaves and then you've got to have a chunk of money to pay them out. So just finding out really what stresses out my tradie and then working out and adapting the framework to suit them and their business is the fun part for me. And it's the part that will often change as well. One thing about Profit First, it's not just set and forget. It's never just you've got this amount of bank accounts, that's it. That might work for some for years to come. For others, it may not. So we always have to be looking at those parts of the business that are causing us issues and then seeing what we can adapt and adjust to make sure that we can avoid any more stress than we have at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that, because it really is around like either, I guess, stresses or opportunities. Because again, one of the ways that I tend to work with Profit First is around the marketing spend too. Having that separate to OPEX makes a huge difference. You can look at, well, what's actually viable percentage wise for the business. And then you can measure that return on investment very easily.
And
so I love that.
That is the key, to be able to measure if that is working. So that's a big one as well for my tradies. It's like, oh, I'm doing all this marketing and I'm spending all this money. I'm like, that's great, but what's your ROI? What are you getting from that? And often the question is, oh, I'm not sure. It's like, okay, cool. And then we go back to simple things like, do you ask people how they found you? No. It's often the answer. I'm like, okay, so why are we spending all this money on marketing over here if you're not even tracking where people are coming from? So it can just highlight little steps in the business that they just don't even realize that they're not doing.
It's so true. And I think another area, and at the moment we're speaking to people that have implemented Profit First and, you know, maybe some accounts that, you know, if they apply to your business or your Profit First setup, you might want to look at. The other area is the owner's pay account. So recently within the Facebook group, we had quite a post about it, which was, you know, what's the best way to deal with this? We've got an owner who is also working in the business and, you know, they want to pay super and of course their net pay and that sort of thing on a weekly basis so that it's out of the bank accounts. Where should it come from? Now that in itself seems like a really straightforward question, but what then ensued was quite the conversation. I think that this is something that we could talk about now. What do you normally recommend, Katie?
It depends. So what I do in this instance with my clients, so I've got the bank account like a framework on a PDF that I've got on my iPad, and we literally just scribble over. I share that screen and we scribble over it, because what I found is there's step one is what bank accounts do you need? And then step two is how are we going to process and do the transfers and make the payments? So for me, they're two separate steps. And what people often do is jump to step two and then go, oh, but how am I going to take, if I'm making the transfer in one ABA file, for example, from my operating expenses account, but my wages is through payroll, and we jump to the doing part of it. So I just like to have the bank account framework and then just scribble it out. What works, what makes sense, talk it through, because what we often come up with first is not often how we do it. So it really is understanding, particularly with the owner's pay account, where make sure your percentages are right, make sure your wages is coming from your owner's pay percentage, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the payment that is made to pay those wages every week is coming from your owner's pay account as such. So for me, what I often do is most of my clients will have the same pay every week for themselves. So we just have an automatic payment set up from their owner's pay account into their OPEX account, because that's where they're going to debit out. That's where they're going to pay the pay run from. So we're still working from the percentages side, but then that practicality of how it works, that's how we do it. In some instances, it really does depend, but it's just about thinking it through. I always say to my client, get a piece of paper and scribble it out. Have a look at it, get it out of our head, because often it's not as complicated as we think it is. And until we put it on paper, we tend to go round in circles. But there are variations of that.
Absolutely. And I think this just highlights that just, because there's a book that outlines the bank accounts, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to work for how you do your banking or how, your pay runs are set up and that sort of thing. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see, especially for those that are doing self-implementation, is that they have their owner's pay account, which has the percentage, and they either have everything included in it so that there's tax, PAYG, especially if they're on payroll, they have their super and they have their net amount, and then it gives them a false sense of they have more money than what is actually theirs to pull. And so that can get confusing, especially if you do have lumpy kind of income that comes in and it's sitting there and there's quite a lot sitting in that account. I find that people overspend, whereas for someone else it might actually work. And so that's where that net transfer that you're talking about going into the OPEX alleviates that problem.
And what I also do in that instance, most of the time, if I've got a client who will get a false sense of, oh, I've got money in there, I always joke that I don't like to do calculations, yet I've always worked in finances, but I want to save my decision making for the really important fun things, not my owner's pay has $5,000 in there. How much of that is PAYG? How much of that is super? I don't want to do that calculation. So often what we will do is the net amount comes down into the operating expenses account, because that's where the pays are going to be paid from. And often we will move the PAYG from the owner's pay up into the BAS account, which holds your GST and BAS. And that is a do not touch account that only gets touched when you're paying your BAS at the end of the quarter, and then pay your super weekly. So then whatever's left, that is accumulating there for your use down the track. You don't have to go, I've got $5,000 there, but 1,000 super, and this is PAYG. I don't want to do those calculations, which is why I often will have more bank accounts than the standard, because I want to get things out of like the operating expenses account. I want my client to be able to see that and know that that's what they've got, and not have to do calculations that there's super or, annual leave accumulations or any of those things in there. We want to make sure that we split it out and make it less complicated. So more bank accounts for me makes it less complicated for the clients.
I love that. And I think that could probably be a generalized statement. And I tend to agree with you on that when it comes to higher dollar figure in the bank account and higher transaction volume that's happening in there. Because like with my clients that I work with that fall under that category, there's a lot going on in a business that size. And if you're having to calculate what's what in each bank account, well, then you may as well just look at your zero. Do you know what I mean? And that doesn't help anyone. So it's not going to help right now. So I love that you said that setting up the different bank accounts or more of them can actually simplify things.
Yeah. Just having a bank account that has a really specific purpose, just like the standard framework. And then you have others that have a specific purpose, and they're not touched until, if you're paying your super quarterly still, great. That's an account that does not get touched until the quarter's up. Whatever it may be, and just have rules around those bank accounts. So as I say, I just like to keep things simple.
Me too. I'm all about the simplicity. And I'd love to just quickly talk now to those that may be watching that have, started to set up Profit First or are considering, setting up Profit First. And I know that for a number of people that I speak to, I guess the information that I get given is I've set up all the 5 bank accounts and I've got Profit First set up-ish.
Yeah.
What would your recommendations be if someone was to say that to you?
Yes, you have got the bank account set up and you've got it set up-ish, but we need to make sure that we take the next step and make sure that you know what your percentage amounts are that go into each of those accounts. Make sure you've done the assessment on your business to know where you sit, and to make sure those percentages are a good starting point, because again, they're a starting point. We really need to make sure that we consistently do profit first. So I always say to my clients, like, once you're in, you're in. If you stop, it makes it harder to get started again. So don't do that to yourself. Even when there's weeks where the numbers, maybe there's not enough in the operating expenses account, or not enough as much as you'd like for certain things, that doesn't mean you stop. That means Profit First is doing its job, and it's showing you that you need to focus on the business in a particular area. So listen to what those numbers are telling you, and don't be afraid to take that next step and actually implement Profit First properly, because it will absolutely change your business. And I say to all of my clients, there will be a period of time where it feels not super fun, because you can't hide anymore. But that's what we want, because when we can see what's wrong, we have the opportunity to then fix it, rather than waiting for months or years down the track and just let the business run us. We can actually take some of that control, or take the control back, and make decisions to help change the direction of our business. Otherwise, we get 5, 10, 15 plus years down the track, and the business has just ruled our lives, and that's not very fun. So jump in, rip the Band-Aid off, get it done.
Yeah, and I would just quickly jump in and say as well that the other way to look at it as well is that if it feels overwhelming, cut back on some bank accounts initially and do it properly in 3 bank accounts. But also, if you're finding you're having to move money from one bank account to another to make it work, then your percentages are either incorrect, or, as Katie was saying, you need to make those changes. And so this is actually where I guess the benefit of working with a Profit First professional really accelerates that difficult time. You go through it a lot quicker into, okay, this stuff actually works.
Yes. And what I find with clients, the feedback that I get is, I often get clients who have attempted to do it themselves for a while, and once we've worked together for a short period of time, most common response is, I should have done this earlier, because we do this all day, every day. So we know the quickest, easiest, simplest way to do it. We know what to look for in your business, so we can, reduce that time where it doesn't feel very fun, and make it much smoother than what it would be if you attempt to do it yourself.
For sure. And we've got a question here from Simon. Thanks for being here with us today. The biggest challenge I'm having now is organising allocation days that reflect accounts receivable, as my work is so sporadic, but I love the materials and subs account. Well, this is definitely something that we see quite often. Did you want to speak to that, Katie?
So firstly, what I would encourage is stick to a date and time, keeping that rhythm. There are exceptions to that rule sometimes for me, for some of my, say, builder clients who are getting 1 or 2 invoices a month and not at a regular point in time. I would say do it when you get that invoice. But I would also ask, what is the reason behind those invoices being paid sporadically? Is it because you're invoicing slowly, or the client's paying you slowly, or there's something that has held up that process that can be worked on and changed and improved? What is the reason for the sporadic income? Or is it just that you're in an industry where that's the way it works? So we really need to figure out which one of those it is. And then sometimes if the income is sporadic, it's a matter of just planning that even further, having a look forward, seeing what your bills are going to be. So when you know where you get that amount in, you know what's coming up, and you know where you're going to fall short, and to again work on trying to get those invoices paid sooner, which often means getting them out sooner, following them up, not letting clients pay you late. That would be one option, but there's always more.
Yeah. I would also jump in here and say that if you've had Profit First implemented for a period of time, Simon, and you're finding that it's a cyclical business And the answer to all of Katie's questions was no, that's not the case. It's just the way it is. What I would recommend there is actually setting up a drip account. And the way the drip account works is whenever that big chunk of money, and this is something that I recommend to farmers a lot because it's like literally once or twice a year that their huge amount of income comes in and can cover everything if you look at it over a year span, but not in the in-between times. And so knowing when that is in the year or month or whatever that the income comes in, so that you can then look at, well, what amount is needed on a regular basis over this time, and then that gets dripped into the income account so that you can be consistent with the Profit First distributions. And the reason why we think it's so important that you stick to a date or a day or a pattern is that it means that you can identify problems so much sooner than if you don't.
Yeah.
So yeah. I can see that you've commented here, it's a bit of both, been laid up, recovering from surgery. I hope you're doing okay. And the team not quite getting enough done without me. I'm sure you see that a lot, Katie.
Yes. So as we said, I work with tradies. So lots of knee reconstructions, shoulder reconstructions, breaks through doing potentially sometimes silly activities, and lots of time out of the business often. One thing that I suggest or work with my clients on is, how are we tracking their hours? Now, I don't come at this from we need to make sure that they're working a full 8 hours in the day and so on. I just want to make sure that we're capturing the hours that they're working, so we can make sure that when we're quoting, that we are actually allowing enough time on that quote. So for example, you might have a job and if you were to do it yourself, it would take you 4 hours. But if one of your team members do it, it takes 6 hours, but you've quoted on the 4 hour rate. And then things are not going to kind of work out at the end of the day from that type of respect. So again, it's, using a job management system where the team can log on and off jobs so that you can at least review your quoting to make sure that firstly, you can always make sure that they're not just having 3-hour lunches, but that's not the purpose when I talk to my clients. The purpose is just so what you've got in your head at how long it takes to do that particular job or that particular activity in that day may be very different from them. And if they can do it quicker when you're there and not as quick when you're not there, then that's a whole nother conversation around managing staff.
Yeah, but I guess that what your current implementation of Profit First is showing is that there is a disconnect there, and that we want to be able to set up your business to serve you so that if you do have to take time out, it's not going to go backwards or you're not going to stress about it. You can actually heal and recover. And so if you could identify those areas, then there's definitely resources and support out there, just as Katie has spoken to. And so I hope that helps.
Yeah, and to plan for those things. I know accidents happen or injuries happen and so on, but again, having those buffers built into your Profit First accounts, having a vault account, having, some personal funds set aside. I say to my clients when we first jump on board together, often they don't have a lot of spare cash, and the thought of building a buffer in an account or putting a stack of money to your vault just in case feels like it's so far down the track and it's not achievable. Again, I say set up an automatic payment for $10, $20, $50 from your operating expenses account to your vault, or from your personal account to another personal account. It doesn't have to be hundreds of dollars to get $10,000 or $5,000. It can just be little amounts. So we're getting into that rhythm of putting that little money aside. That will potentially make a small difference and hopefully a larger difference down the track. Profit First, I always say it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. We want to start making these little changes now so that they all accumulate and make it better for us, not only now, but more so down the track as well.
I love that. Simon's just commented again saying, having the materials and subs account has clearly shown him that without him being active, the guys are not completing enough, even though they are on piece rate, and the weather has also played a big part. It also shows him that he needs at least a couple of teams to complete the workflow cycles rather than relying on one. Like, what a win. That is, don't you think, Katie?
That's amazing. And that's what I mean. Like, there's just so much information. Our businesses tell us what is going on and what's working and what's not working. We just have to be open to listen to what it's telling us. And by splitting out those bank accounts, as I said, particularly that materials and subs account makes such a difference. If you do nothing else today, just open that materials and subs account and start looking at that. If you're in the trade space, it'll absolutely make a huge difference to your business.
Absolutely. And I can see that Simon said that he's also spent a lot on future jobs that haven't even started. And so I would say at that point, do you really need to do that as much as you're doing? And if so, then your percentages probably need to be tweaked again. What would you say, Katie?
Yeah. I'd be asking, are we getting deposits? Again, it comes back to, are we getting deposits? Do we need to buy those now? Can we delay that process? Do you have accounts that they can go on? But again, accounts, I'm not a massive fan of supplies going on accounts because it gives you this false sense of what's going on. So again, really planning out, getting a deposit is key as well. And I know there's all different restrictions in different states as to how much that can be. And I get a lot of feedback from people going, oh, I can't ask for a deposit. And my response to all that always is why? Why not? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Okay, maybe we can. Let's try it. So often the answer is not just do these. It is like, can you get a deposit? Can you get a deposit paid earlier? Do you have to buy so far in advance? Are you buying the correct amount for what you need? Or are you buying extra because you're getting a little bit of a discount, but in fact, that's just ending up costing you more down the track?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Katie. And I hope, Simon, that's helped you out today as well. And thank you for, commenting with us and letting us have a bit of a dive into your business, because it will surely help those that are watching this replay. Before we do jump off, Katie, how are you currently working with people when it comes to the implementation of Profit First?
Yeah, so as PFPs, we all do it slightly differently. How I love to work with clients is I have 2 programs that I run. So one is a Profit First Foundations program. So if you're the type of client who just wants to get Profit First set up in their business and get help working out what your percentages are, what bank accounts you need, and how to get started, then I have a short 10-week online program. So online training, and we jump on and have group coaching sessions. So when you're stuck with something, we just step you through. And that works really well for a business of any size, actually. It doesn't really matter what size business you are. That works really well to get Profit First set up and off and running. So you're not 6 months, 12 months down the track saying I've only got a couple of bank accounts opened. And then for those who are really looking to understand the financial side of their business more, they might be looking to grow. They might have some really amazing personal goals that they need the business to be able to support them with. Then I have my permanently profitable tradie program. So that's a 12-month program where, similar to the Profit First, in that we have online training, we have group sessions, I run masterminds, we do a whole bunch of stuff in that. And that is really stepping through the financial parts of your business to review how it's working at the moment, set up the systems to make sure they're simple and efficient, and then make sure that we're actually setting goals and working towards those. Because otherwise we end up, as I said before, 5-10 years down the track in business and realize that we haven't really progressed further, but we've had a whole lot of stress, and that's not very fun. And then for those businesses, the final way for those businesses who are usually larger, ready to commit, get it done. I do work one-on-one with just a really select group of people each quarter. So I never take maybe 1-2 people max every quarter. So that's working one-on-one with me every week for 12 weeks. There's no hiding in that program. We are both 110% committed, and we are getting in and getting Profit First set up, getting the financial side of your business all sorted out so that you can condense that 12 months down to a 3-month period and start achieving those goals that we have, that we all talk about, that we're going to do when we win this next job, when we get more staff, when the weather clears up. We just get in and get it done. So that's the 3 main options.
What we'll do is we'll drop a link to Katie's website and Katie's email address. And I'm sure that you can find Katie on Facebook and Insta and all of the places. And if you're not necessarily in the trades business and would like help with a with Profit First from a Profit First professional, you can also be paired with a Profit First professional through us as well. And I love, Simon, that you've commented that you can honestly say it's been the best cash management system that you've ever seen or used, and that you only wish you knew about it 20 years ago, and we feel the exact same way. So thank you for being here with us today. And Katie, thank you so much for sharing your insights around optimizing Profit First in the trades businesses. We will see you all soon.
Bye.
Thanks, Katie.